Attendance.
Voted.
Rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's jump into the minutes. Item 2A, minutes of the City Council work session on February 18th. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved. Can you hear that?
I have a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes, one abstention. The minutes are approved. Item 2B, minutes of the regular City Council meeting on February 25th, 2025. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
A motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Item 3, adoption of the agenda. I'll note that we have an update to item 4C to the resolution and memorandum, shifting the setup from Saturday morning to Friday after 7 p.m. If there are no other corrections or changes to the agenda, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. A motion is second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have an agenda. Item 4, consent agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as updated.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, visitors and presentations, nothing scheduled. Item 6A, the 2025 pavement rehabilitation project, ordering improvements, approving plans and specifications, and authorizing advertisements for bid. Mr. Coppy.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So tonight we have our next steps of our 2025 pavement rehabilitation project. Tonight we'll have a public hearing, and we'll just go over a little bit of the background of the project first. So the 2025 pavement rehabilitation project is Division Avenue from 5th Street up to the north city limits at the railroad tracks, and then 12th Street from Division Avenue to Long Avenue. So each year, staff goes through, we look at and come up with basically a 5-year plan of what we need to look at for pavement maintenance. Typically a full reconstruction, we're looking at about a 50-year life cycle. The mill and overlay side of things, we're looking at about a 25-year life cycle. So kind of try to stagger those so that we maximize the life of our roadways. This year, Division Avenue is about 0.64 miles. And that's just a mill and overlay. 12th Street, which is one of the roads that does not have curb and gutter and up to our current municipal standard. That's 0.17 miles. So we're doing about 0.8 miles of roadway this year. So back on February 11th, council accepted the feasibility study. So from an engineering standpoint, in order to assess any portion of a project, we need to find that the project is necessary, cost-effective, and feasible. That's required by state statute 429. So that was accepted by council on February 11th, moving us to the next step where council ordered a public hearing tonight. Again, the extent of the project, reconstruction with adding curb and gutter to 12th Street, mill and overlay, some curb repairs on Division Avenue. We're going to extend a piece of sidewalk, which will tie into the work that the high school did. That'll go from Division Court up to the south entrance of Wild Marsh to give that neighborhood access to the sidewalk system within the city. We're going to do some storm sewer repairs. Additions will be on 12th Street. Currently, no curb and gutter, just kind of a real rudimentary shallow ditch system along there. So we will be adding storm sewer that will go, some of it will flow back to the west to the storm sewer on Division Avenue, and the rest of it will go, about a third of it will go east to Long Avenue into a system along the railroad there. We'll also look at some water and sanitary sewer repairs. We always like to get in and do some of the underground repairs and replace valves, hydrants as needed, so that we don't disrupt that new street after a few years. And then we'll also work with the private utilities to get any work that they need done. A lot of that's been done already, but we were coordinating with them to make sure that it is all complete so that they don't damage our new roadway. So the estimated project cost for this year, so the total estimated improvement cost is $1,382,400. Of that, we typically assess about a third of our projects. That's been historic practice through the city's assessment policy. So we'll be assessing about a little over $300,000, and then just over $1 million will be paid through city funds, primarily through bonding. As far as estimated assessments go, for single family, we're looking at for reconstruction anywhere between $2,800 and $6,000, a little over $6,000. If we find they need to do any sewer Y or service work or water service work, those numbers are there as well. We will do those inspections as we move forward with the project, make sure that at least as we sit today, it appears that all of the homes up there are up to date, but we'll work with the residents as we get going with the project. And then the mill and overlay portion of the project along Division, the assessments are between $1,000 and $2,400. So you can see why we want to try to do those staggered approaches to pavement maintenance to help save a lot of costs for $1,000 to $2,500 to a resident share of maintaining the road for 25 years is pretty good. So the estimated or the assessment payments would be paid over a 15-year period. The interest rate that we charge our residents is 2% over bond rate. In 2024, that was 5.42%. This would be payable on the 2026 taxes. So as we go into the schedule, the neighborhood meeting, we had that last year. We ordered the feasibility study. The most recent action, we received the feasibility study and ordered the hearing on February 11th. We're here tonight to hold the public hearing, and if council chooses to move forwards, they would order plans and specs and authorize staff to go for bids. We would anticipate a late April contract award, and with road restrictions going on pretty early, we would anticipate a pretty early start date. However, we will work around the school district's school schedule and whatnot, so there's work that we might be able to get out there and do with school in session, but the majority of the disruption will be after school is out. And then construction will go, we're anticipating May through October. We're hoping it will be much sooner than that, just due to the size and scope of the project. And then the assessment hearing we would have sometime in September. Tonight we will hold the public hearing. That is an opportunity for residents or property owners with interest in the project to speak either for or against if they so wish, so that they can extend their comments to council. Council will then deliberate, and if so, if council wants to move forward with the project, staff would recommend adoption of the attached resolution ordering the improvement, approving plans and specifications, and authorizing staff to go for bids. With that, I would recommend we hold the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Copy. At this time, I will open up the public hearing. I have two names on my list. I will just remind folks that this is a public hearing for the pavement rehabilitation project and that issue only. So I have the first name on my list as a resident at 2191 12th Street. And if you could state your name and address for the record, that would be great. Thank you.
2191 12th Street. I'm going to say I'm against this due to I got a couple of, kids, and it's not really in my budget. Also, I'm speaking for a couple of the residents that are also next to me that are my parents' own for rentals, and they're trying to, have, a small, easy living, and they're going to have to raise their rent up on them, and they'll possibly end up leaving maybe because it might be too high. They're just trying to have like an affordable, living. So I think it's a little out of my budget as well, and it feels like I'm taken away from my two boys. So I think that's about it. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, I've got a resident at 2154 12th Street.
John Moran, 2154 12th Street. I lived in that house for 27 years, raised my family there. The street improvements that I see that could be done there would be just a nice mill and overlay. The drainage seems to be going pretty nice down there. I don't believe we need curb and gutter. If you come through and take curb and gutter, you're going to come in at about 10, 12 feet into my yard, along with the rest of the residents. And there's a house right now, if you were to cut that much back, you'd be like 6 inches from his front window. You know, I understand about sewer and water. That's what I do for a living. It's just, you know, and then along with Division Avenue, the school come in, put that mega campus down there. We come in and talked about it. It just basically got jammed in there. So that's where all the extra heavy duty traffic is coming from. The buses used to come up and down 12th Street all the time, park on the street there. You know, I have friends that work in the water and sewer departments in different cities. They say that water lines and sewer lines can be, they sleeve them. They put a tube inside of them and reconstruct them and make them last longer than what the life expectancy are on some of those. Some of the numbers that he had up there, I received a notice from the city. My bill alone for 80 feet of frontage is $6,800. That seems like a lot of money for 80 feet of frontage road in front of my house. You know, and with the schools that come in, the kids come up, they get dropped off. The parents park on both sides of the street in the afternoon from, you know, 2:45 or 2:15 or whatever it is until the kids get out. So we still have that traffic, even though the city promised us we wouldn't have the bus traffic. Well, we still have the residents that come up Division, park on both sides, waiting to turn into that school to pick up their precious kids. I understand that. But, you know, you're putting a burden on all the neighbors. And like Mr. Lowell said, you know, his parents own some rental properties down there. We've got a couple elderly couples that live in the neighborhood. You know, I'm not against a mill and overlay and fixing what needs to be fixed, but I don't believe we need storm sewer, sidewalk, curb, and gutter. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, those are all the names on my list, but anyone else that would like to speak to this issue is welcome to do so now, please.
Hello, Val Hansen. I live at 5118 Wild Marsh Drive, and I'm supportive of the project. Wild Marsh, we have the 2 driveways, and we're interested in having concrete apron added to our driveway, and I just wanted to check the timing with the engineer when he needs to know our final yes or no.
Mayor, members of the council, we will be, following this meeting, we'll be sending out some information to residents that we're moving forward with the project. Typically, we send those letters out once we get the bid award so that we know exact costs from the contractor. So that gives residents a true and exact cost. So we expect that sometime in mid-April.
Mid-April, okay.
Mid-April, that will come out. Residents will have their opportunity to enter into that driveway program. We'll do an estimate for any resident or townhomes that would like to do that, and then get that estimate. Typically, give a few weeks to make that decision, and then we'll get the contractor working on it.
Okay, thanks. I just didn't want to miss the deadline.
Thank you. All right, anyone else would like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to the council. Council, questions for Mr. Coppy or comments? Councilmember Walsh.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, I'm just thinking about what we just heard. What are the options on payment? I mean, there's some options available to us or to homeowners. I mean, obviously, you can pay it all at once. Some of these numbers are pretty big. You can have it added to your property taxes over 15 years. That's like option 2. Are there some other programs, relief, extensions available to residents? Is there anything out there that we could recommend?
Mayor, members of the council, the 2 options that they would do are the like you had mentioned, the pay up front, and then you don't get levied any interest on that. Your other option is to let it go to your property taxes over a 15-year period at the rate of the bond rate plus 2%. The options, there are deferral options for senior deferrals. So If anybody, and we'll send out that information following this meeting as well, once we move forward with the project, that will provide information to residents through that assessment process to make them aware of those deferment options if they qualify for it.
And just since I have the mic, just a comment on curbs and gutters, and I mean, a lot of times, a lot of these projects, folks come in from the neighborhood and say, we don't need it. We don't need curb and gutter. And we appreciate that. We appreciate the current people who live there saying we don't need curb and gutter. But one of the philosophies, I think, is that, you know, you may not live there you probably won't live there forever, obviously. And so we've been doing curb and gutter everywhere across the city. So we just really haven't had that as an option. Well, I shouldn't say that. No, I was a sidewalk where we said we didn't do a sidewalk when a neighborhood said we don't want a sidewalk. So we did say no on that. But curb and gutter, we pretty much have said it's what the city is doing citywide, and it's it's not just for the current occupant of the house; it's for the city forever. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Cowpey, does so the situations that were described, I'm referencing the conversations at the mic. Would you make the case, first of all, for curb and gutter in the whole 9 yards on 12th Street? What is the recommendation? Where is that coming from? How is that consistent or inconsistent with the other practices that we've?
Mayor, members of the council, as Councilmember Walsh had stated, that's been the kind of the goal and practice of the city is to urbanize. Curb in a lot of the instances, as one of the residents had spoke, helps with a lot of the traffic, the parking issues, the better defines the roadway, it's easier to plow, it's easier to manage that stormwater. It increases value to properties. So obviously, from an assessment standpoint, we do not, or we have an independent appraiser look at our assessments. We would not assess greater than the property benefit. So we would look at kind of adding value to the neighborhood, and then the other items that I mentioned before. I will mention. I stated that we will be doing some sewer and water repairs, minor ones, replacing an old hydrant, a valve that's not working, not wholesale replacement of the water or sewer systems. As a gentleman spoke, that those can be done pretty intrusively after the fact through lining, things like that. So those repairs aren't going to, none of those kind of repairs need to be made in this area. The sewer and water are new enough. So the project generally entails just a few utility repairs versus any wholesale replacement.
And what would be the reason we can't have the curb and gutter without a full reconstruction? That's why we don't do a mill and overlay. Am I capturing that correctly?
Mayor, members of the council, also on 12th Street, it's quite an old roadway. We did so before we go in and we do an analysis on the pavement, or the existing pavement out there, and we drill cores down. So we drill down and we take a core sample out and we see what's under there. Really, it's substandard. There's not enough gravel under it for today's roadway standards. There's not enough pavement. I'll call it back in the day, typically we would have gravel roads in town. You come in and you might put a little bit of blacktop on it, maybe you just sprayed oil on it, and over the years you just kind of got this hodgepodge of layers. So that's kind of what we're dealing with out there, where there's not really a set engineered standard for that roadway. So even if we didn't add curb and gutter, or the council elected not to add curb and gutter, we would still have to tear out all of that material that's in there, put new gravel in there to a current standard. We would put a fresh layer of pavement. The only thing you wouldn't be putting in is curb and gutter, or that storm sewer. So the pavement itself, it's not just a mill and overlay. Even if you were Division Avenue, the substrate below is solid enough. There's enough thickness there where it just really needs a new surface. 12th Street really needs to be completely removed and replaced.
Okay. So can you comment on I'm not familiar with the specific houses that were being referenced. If in fact we are taking right-of-way and bringing us within a very narrow space with an existing home, is that a situation, and what have your preliminary studies shown?
Mayor, members of the council, per our current plans that we are working on, we're not impacting outside of the right-of-way, so we're staying within the city's right-of-way with there. We're 10 feet back in some areas to grade out. We'll replace that, resod it. If it's yard, if it is driveway, we come in and saw cut, replace that with like materials. A lot of people end up getting half of a new driveway in the end, so it does benefit them as a whole. But I'm not aware of any houses that we're getting that close to or getting outside of the right-of-way.
Okay. And then my last question, senior deferral. So the specific situation, I think, at least what I thought I heard, is that there are individual seniors there who are renting but not owning. Does the senior deferral only available to owners who are seniors, or is it available to renters who are seniors?
Mayor, members of the council, it's available only to those property owners. It's because the assessment is levied to the property, not the renter. There may be county or other programs that are available to renters who may need assistance, so we can definitely help steer them in that direction if need be.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve the resolution ordering the improvements and plans and specifications.
I'll approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, this fails for lack of a second.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
can we have some conversation?
I'm happy to have the conversation. Would someone like to second it? And then I would say, is there any further discussion?
I'll second for purposes of discussion.
Is there any further discussion?
Well, I'm trying to understand where our three other council members, Member Walsh has spoken, I'm trying to understand the issues that are preventing others from supporting.
Councilmember Hughes.
Mr. Mayor, I think that I just did not do my own homework in terms of going to the street and actually seeing the impact a street would have on that. And I guess maybe I should ask Mr. Copy. Sorry. I understand right-of-way. Lots of us put our yard in right-of-way. Some of us have fenced right-of-way. I didn't do it, but it was there. So, there's a difference between right-of-way and what somebody is already using as yard. And while the city understands that it owns it, how much is going to be taken that someone is using as a yard right now that it's going to turn into street? Are we going to widen the street through this?
Mayor, members of the council, as far as widening the street, the actual bituminous mat or the black part will become a consistent width. The usable area that's out there, so we have a narrower mat out there, the width of the blacktop, but there's kind of used space, where people park, pull over, a couple of feet either side of that. So typically we're going to straighten that out to generally that location. I think what the worry is that we're, in order to put the curb in, that we're grading back out beyond that area into the yard. If it's grass and they mow it, it will be replaced with grass and they'll mow it in the future. But generally speaking, what they see as the usable width of the roadway today won't change.
So if it does, we're talking about a foot or two, not 10 feet.
Correct.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better when someone's talking about, I have a neighbor who the right-of-way goes through his dining room. So when we're talking about in that, I understand that we all understand it's the city's property, but it would be very difficult for us to get it back. So based on that, I don't have any problem with it.
Mr. Copy, is there anything unique or peculiar about this pavement rehabilitation project that differentiates it from what we've been doing every year for three decades?
Mayor, members of the council, this is very typical of just about any neighborhood that we go in.
Thank you. All right, I've had a motion, a second. We're still in discussion. Would anyone else have a comment on this? All right, all those in favor, I'm sorry, did you? Councilmember Edberg.
I'm in my 16th year on this council, and this is the first time in any of those years where we've done a street construction project sometimes two, or multiple projects in a given year. It's the first time I've experienced this kind of a conversation at the council table. So I'm just kind of trying to understand where the other issues are. Councilmember Hughes, I appreciate your contribution. I'm just kind of trying to understand what's going on.
Mr. Mayor.
Please.
I will, to that point, say I wasn't aware of any concerns before showing up here this evening, so I didn't do an in-depth study of what the road looked like. So I was not prepared. Homework had not been done. Sorry, Ms. Crawford.
Councilmember West.
So more or less, it was kind of sticker shock for me, and I take really seriously when people are saying that it's hard to afford things that the city decides to do. And so I guess it's not that I am opposed to it. I didn't necessarily want to be the first one to second it. But Mr. Coppy, I wonder if you could, so there's a gentleman who came up and spoke and said that it was going to be $6,800 in assessment for him. So I'm not expecting you to be a math wizard or anything like that, but if somebody decided to pay that over, it's 15 years, right? I'm sorry, but I'm trying, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to like, I'm just trying to kind of figure, what?
So we need the finance director.
453,
Divided, yeah, 6,800 divided by 15, though. It's without interest and anything. That would be $453 per year.
okay, and that's assessed per month?
Per year. It's
Oh,
over
I'm sorry.
15 years.
Assessed on your annual property taxes.
Thank you, yeah, okay. So it's a little under 500.
We'll just call it 500 with all the interest.
Yep, okay. Okay, I just wanted to get a measure of that, thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Ms. West, to that point, these numbers don't look any more obnoxious than any other year. I will say that. I mean, it's based on your property size, so he's got a nice 80 feet there, but none of them are.
Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The resolution has passed. Item 7A, public dog beach operations at Matoska Park. Mr. Coppy.
All right, me again. All right, Matoska Dog Beach history. Not gonna I'll go fairly fast on this. I just want to remind those that have not seen it or are in the audience tonight who were not here at the February 25th hearing. So again, it kind of goes back to the 2007 era where we first really started to look at it. Council changed some ordinances and adopted a resolution designated some off-leash dog areas, Lakewood Hills, Varney, and Matoska. 2016, we had some concerns. Park Advisory Commission looked at it in 2017. Park Advisory Commission at that time recommended closure. Council recommended keeping it open. 2018, it was reviewed just to see how things were going, and they left it status quo at that point. 2021, public concerns regarding the dog beach are heard once again. Again, a lot of things happened in 2020 with COVID and everybody out and about, so I just heard a lot more people out, a lot more people using the park. 2022, the Park Advisory Commission was asked to review the operations. Recommended it be kept open with some provisions such as fencing, signage, buoys. 2023, Council kept the dog beach open with the recommended provisions made by the Park Advisory Commission. 2024, as good measure, the Park Advisory Commission was asked to review that operations again. Really worked with law enforcement or police this time in 2024 to do more visits down to the dog beach, and just found some different clash with the code regarding the leash requirement, how the ordinance was different than some of the language adopted in 2017 when they signed the dog beach requiring a leash. So the two didn't match. They weren't able to do the enforcement that they were requested to do. So in 2024, the Park Advisory Commission said the beach should, or the off-leash dog area at Matoska should remove the dog leash requirement to comply with or to align with city code, and didn't see an issue with it. To help with the enforcement side, clearly sign entering and exiting the dog beach area so that it's very clear for law enforcement. If it was kept open, they recommended, just for good measure, to extend the buoys separating the dog beach and the swim area an additional 50 feet, just to prevent dogs from getting. Few got out kind of near the end, so they thought that would be a good measure from their visits down there. And then they supported the concept of seasonal CSOs that would work the entire lakeshore along White Bear Lake within the city. So the only real physical improvement would be to extend those buoys that additional 50 feet. Just as a reminder, those looking at the map, that pictures from last year, the Y dock typically is not in that location, but we decided to use every piece that we could for the swimming beach just because of the lake level. So the Y dock is typically south of the dog beach area. So tonight, based on recommendations from the February 25th public hearing, staff was asked to bring back 2 resolutions. The first resolution would direct continued operations of the dog beach, implementing improvements recommended by the Parks Commission. Second resolution, as an option, would be a resolution terminating operations of the dog beach. Other options would be is to reject both, and it would go on a status quo. We did not provide resolutions for these 2 options, or if based on the conversation of council at the February 25th public hearing, whether they want to direct staff to look at other locations while either keeping open or closing the dog beach. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Coppy. In terms of process, we've got 2 resolutions before us. It really doesn't matter how we approach this. I think we're just going to have a general discussion. It makes sense that the resolution deciding whether to close it or not is really where we should start the conversation. And then if it ultimately is the will of the council to keep it open, then we should take up the second one, decide what that looks like if it does remain open. So that's how I propose we take this. I'll just kick things off with just a thank you to the residents who sent emails and made phone calls to me and the council since the public hearing. As I noted at the public hearing, which was very well attended, I encouraged people to email, and I think they did, and was impressed with the participation. I will say, if I didn't respond to everyone, I did read all your emails, but there were a lot of them. So thank you for that participation. I'm sure I'll have more comments as the debate goes on, but we'll kick things off with just throwing it to council. Anybody want to kick us off with whether they want to advocate for keeping it open, closing it?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'll go first, I guess. What is your preference? Do you want a resolution on the table to discuss, or do you want to have an open discussion first?
I think it makes sense for someone to move the primary resolution closing dog beach operations. We'll see if it gets seconded, and then at that point we will take a healthy pause and have lively discussion on this. So I would entertain a motion to approve the second resolution before us, which closes the dog beach.
Yeah, so that would be my motion. I'd move that. I have one question on the resolution, but maybe I can get it in seconded first to see if we even are going to have a discussion of it.
I have a motion on that resolution. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on this? Councilmember Walsh.
So just a question for staff that prepared the resolution. The last clause, be it further resolved, the city manager is hereby directed to bring forward a proposal to the city council amending the municipal code as necessary relating to off-leash dog areas in Matoska Park. I've been working on this a little bit, and so I don't think that's necessary, I guess. I guess it doesn't hurt to have it in there because it says as necessary. I think the language is pretty... It's more wide open. It's not related to Matoska Park. The definition of designated area is a designated area in any city park area as defined by the city council set aside for the dog training or recreational activities. So I don't know what we would amend in the city code. I mean, so I just maybe if it's not necessary, we can take it out. If it's okay, we can leave it in.
Ms. Crawford.
Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, in 2007, the city code, the city council, I believe, amended city code to allow 3 off-leash areas, and one of those is Matoska. I need some more time to do research. That's why I put the as necessary, but I didn't want to miss that because in 2017, via resolution, something was adopted that doesn't align with municipal code. So I was trying to kind of have a catch-all in there, but more research needs to be done regarding if municipal code needs to be brought back for amendments.
Okay, good. Then we'll just leave it in here. I think it's worded right because it says as necessary, so it certainly doesn't hurt. All right, well, we don't have to spend 3 hours on this tonight, right? So I made some notes after listening to the public testimony. I got a lot of emails. And we all spoke, I think, which was appropriate at the public hearing just to give some feedback. Although some people said, we tipped our hand after the public hearing as if we weren't listening and the fix is in, but it's kind of darn if you do, darn if you don't. I mean, if we say nothing, it feels like we don't listen. If we start to say what we're thinking, then it's like, well, you already had your predetermined and I didn't bother coming. So I want to say that everybody up here is listening, but at some point we have to start coming to a decision individually on it. So I don't think any of us did anything wrong by voicing where we're at, where we're going, what we're hinting at. So I voiced that night that I'm leaning towards closing the beach. We heard all these arguments. Mainly it just doesn't fit. It's an amenity that does not fit. And we talk about that a lot in the city when we talk about developments in neighborhoods, business, zoning, things like that. Things just sometimes don't fit where they're proposed. And this thing has, I think the mayor said last time, a victim of its own success. It's grown in popularity, clear popularity. We heard that passionately. And it's become so big and so popular in this small spot, in this neighborhood, that it just doesn't fit. Let me just tick through a number of things we heard in the discussion. In no particular order. I guess I did order them, but the order doesn't mean that much. One thing we heard is water quality. A lot of people talked about water quality. I don't think water quality is an issue. I'm not worried about water quality with the dog beach as is. I'm satisfied with the testing that we're doing. So if your reason to vote it, to keep it open is because water quality, one way or the other, it's really not an issue to close it or to keep it open. I think, and it's never been voiced by me, and I think a lot of people that would rather have it closed. I don't think that's the strongest argument for it. Noise, however, I think is an issue, a legitimate issue, legitimate concern for the neighborhood. And we heard some discussions like, well, noise could be anywhere in the city. Dogs bark all over the city. It might not be the dog beach. And dog barking and noise is not limited to the dog beach. That's all true conceptually, but I've been on the council 9 years, and I don't remember a noise complaint in 9 years in the council in Ward 1, at least. No one's ever called me and said there's a noise issue in Ward 1. This is a noise issue that we've heard about for a long time. So while there's a perception or a possibility of a noise, Councilmember Edberg, you used the example of a guy in his garage working on his cars. That could happen. That does happen. It's a one-off thing that can be dealt with. This is a constant noise issue in one spot, and it's been happening for years. So I think it's just a little different. We talked about this conflict between our ordinance on leash laws, and I think this is an interesting point because it's clearly a conflict. We've got a sign on the dog beach that says dogs have to stay on leash, and I was here when we did that. It was kind of ad hoc between Councilmember Jones and the audience, we try to get to yes, right? That was Councilmember Jones trying to get agreement, and it just got thrown out. Well, what if there was a 30-foot leash rule? Would that work? Somebody shouted, yeah, it'll work, and then we voted for it. Well, it doesn't really work. So now you have this conflict between our code that says leashes don't have to be worn in designated areas. I just read the definition of designated areas in a park. And yet this sign at the park says dogs must be on a leash. So the answer is to take them off the leash, which exacerbates the problem of dogs being off leash. That's one of the big problems with the dog beach we're hearing from the neighborhood, in addition to noise. And so I think the fact that the answer to this conflict makes the problem worse is another point that tells me this doesn't work here. It doesn't work here. And our own conflict in the rule, in the code, kind of brings that out. The solution makes the problem worse. So maybe there shouldn't be a dog beach in that location, because getting them off leash, I think, makes it much worse. A lot of people say, well, if we close the beach, people are still going to come there. It's going to be a big enforcement problem. Maybe, temporarily, that'll be the case. If you keep the beach open, I think we're going to see the neighborhood complain more. I think one of the points made in this process was there's only 10 calls from the police, and one of them was, one of them was this, one of that. So really, there's no problem. There's no data, from the neighborhood showing this is a real problem. If I was a neighbor and I heard this discussion and they kept the beach open, I think that we could have an increase in calls coming from the neighborhood this summer, because maybe we feel we got to get this more documented. So it's not a reason, neither is a reason to keep it open or to close it, is what might happen after we make a decision. If we vote to close it, people for a while may come down and try to use the park. I think there's going to be a learning curve there. I think there's going to be some behavior modification that has to happen. But over time, I think that goes away. Over time, I think the word will get out. There is no dog beach at White Bear Lake anymore, and people will find another place to recreate their dogs. So I don't think that is a reason not to close it. It's also a reason not to keep it open, that the complaints might keep coming. If the vote is to keep it open, we'll have to live with whatever the complaints come through. So I will say this, Mayor, you said you're happy with the feedback. I was too, but I think, I don't know that this is our best moment as a city. We've done a lot of debates, a lot of contentious debates up here, and I think some of the tone has not been the greatest. I think we've lost some civility in this debate. And I challenged people in emails that emailed me to say, I get it, the dog beach is a popular amenity. Help me as a council member balance this popular amenity with the concerns of the neighbors, the real concerns of the neighbors today. And I didn't get much answer. I didn't get much help in that. And I think that's where the civility kind of took a turn, because if there is no good answer, if there is no good balance, then it's, well, forget the neighbors. They should have known better when they bought it. They're exaggerating their claims about dogs taking hamburgers off of plates. Maybe they're lying. They should have known better before they moved in. They should understand what it means to live by a park. Everybody lives by a park, can't complain and shut the park down. That's where I think we lost civility a little bit in this discussion, because I think they can't argue and they can't come up with that balance question of how do you balance a really great amenity that's getting overused in a neighborhood with property rights and everything else. So that's kind of where I come down. And my last point is that I think we're being a little inconsistent here on listening to neighbors. We usually listen to the neighbors. We usually listen to the neighborhood, I think, a little better. Not always. Sometimes neighbors come and say they don't want something. Like tonight, we're not going to listen on the curb and gutter project. We don't always listen to the neighbors, but I really feel like we're not listening very well here. And I'll give some examples. We listened to the neighbors on County Road E in Bel Air last year, or 2 years ago, I think now. The original proposal was perfectly legal. It fit, it met the rules, but the neighborhood didn't like it. Parking concerns, they were worried about water runoff, which we always take care of. We would never do a project without being perfect on that. So we said no to the original proposal. We listened to the neighbors. They came back with a much smaller proposal. That developer didn't make as much money. We listened to the neighbors. That proposal is going forward, and it's good. I'll just give another example, not so much from the public because they weren't really involved in this discussion as much, but we've talked recently about putting the public dock back at the end of Clark Street. And we had a discussion internally, and I think staff reached out. We were very concerned with the two neighbors at the top of the hill at Clark Street that would be impacted by the public dock going back in. We were very concerned about those two neighbors. And half a mile down the beach, maybe not even half a mile down the beach, we're not listening to the neighbors that are saying this is a problem, it's a persistent problem that's not going away. So I want to listen to the neighbors. This thing doesn't fit where it's at. It's unique in the state because it's super hard to do dog beaches because of all these problems, especially without a parking lot and everything else is concerned. So that's why I'm moving the resolution to close it. I pledge to work on finding another location. If this is an amenity that White Bear Lake seems to think we need to provide for the rest of the Twin Cities or for our residents, I'm happy to do that. It looks expensive. Everything we look at is going to cost money. But I'm willing to do it and discuss it and maybe even vote for some money for it because of the outpouring of support we have for this amenity. So it just doesn't fit here. So that's why I'm moving the resolution.
All right, any further discussion on this? Councilmember Engstrand.
I'd like to add an amendment to that to close the 7th Street beach also with that dog beach for the same reasons why we're closing the dog beach. And for the same reasons you don't want to open up the Clark beach. It's too small, too loud. Kids are louder than dogs. So I want to put an amendment in to close the beach also.
All right, I have a motion to amend the resolution to add closing the 7th Street swim dock. Do I have a second? The motion fails for lack of a second. Councilmember Engstrand, I was puzzled at our last council meeting when you wanted to close the 7th Street swim dock if the dog beach closed, and you started to flesh it out a little bit tonight. You said for the same reasons. Help me understand that, because I think that's sort of, in my mind, part and parcel with where the divide is in this conversation, which is people that have dogs and like dogs, and then it's sort of the insinuation that if you want to close the dog beach, somehow you're anti-dog or dog ownership. So can you flesh that out for me? How are they the same? Kids recreating and dogs.
Well, you're worried about volume of people or the noise. Kids are there for 2, 3, 4 hours, 5 hours at a time. Dogs are there for 20 minutes, half hour, and they're gone. Kids are there a lot longer. Kids are urinating in the water a lot more than the dogs are. Kids are going to yell, scream, and holler when you throw a ball at them or a frisbee or something more than the dogs. So if you're going to complain about the dogs, you got to complain about the people. The area there is too small. You can't like just lay out and have a picnic there. It's all the same reasons. There's another big beach just down the road, 2 of them, as a matter of fact, that they can go to.
So just to wrap my head
This
around
way,
this.
we can also add more canoe paddleboards and get that list that somebody said was a mile long shortened.
Okay.
And Bill Walsh is always looking for us to make some money. There you go. We can make some money.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm understanding your argument. You're entitled to it. I would push back and say the sound of children playing is not the same as excessive dog barking. Maybe you folks agree. I think they're two totally different things. I think kids swimming at a dog beach or at a swim dock are not the same as a rambunctious dog that, you know, I'm sure there are some slow dogs, but most dogs are pretty quick and they're prone to running off. So I think that's a whole different analysis altogether. So I have a hard time squaring those two. And the reason I wanted to bring it up, the motion failed, so that's not a part of the resolution. But I think it does in part speak to what seems to be the back and forth on this, which is this argument that the overarching policy belief should be that folks with dogs absolutely have a right to the beach. Dogs have a right to recreate in the lake over and above the consideration of homeowners that have valid concerns. And I have a hard time reconciling that. And Councilmember Walsh, when I spoke at the beginning and thanked people for their participation, I meant genuinely the volume and the fact that people spoke up. The tenor and some of the content that I read from those that were in favor of keeping the dog beach open was just downright rude. That's relevant to me, not that I care if people insult me or if someone calls me a dictator in the paper. I have a thick skin. But what it does for me is it helps crystallize the complaints that I've heard from many, many residents when they say, we've tried to approach these dog beach users and tried to be respectful and have been met with contempt, have been met with disrespect. who do you believe? I can only give people my own impressions, but based on many emails that I've read and comments and whispers from the public hearing, some that were reported back to me after the fact, those two things seem to jive with each other. The folks that have said emails that goes beyond what I would call honest civil discourse. So beyond that, I've had my own interactions at the dog beach as a park commission member and as mayor, and I've witnessed some of that. It hasn't been as nasty as what's been reported to me. It hasn't been quite the same tone that I've seen in the emails. But I've witnessed that with my own two eyes. So it's frustrating to me as I try and balance these two. As I said on the Park Commission in 2017, when I stood up at that podium when we were dealing with this issue and the same complaints, I said, everyone here on the Park Commission loves parks and wants to do everything we can to create as many amenities as we possibly can. And that was at a time when the Park Commission voted 6-0 in favor of closing it at that time. So the idea that people that are in favor of closing it are doing it because we want to take away rights, that we think dog beaches are bad, that we think people with dogs are bad, just simply isn't the case. I love my 4-year-old border collie. I've never used the dog beach, but I love dogs. This is an argument of basic logic, of finite space, very real complaints that despite what some have said, that it's one or two people or a not in my backyard argument, make a data practices request. You can audit my mayor email. You can see the ones that have come in. People that live nearby, live several blocks away, live on the other side of White Bear, that have a sailboat mooring buoy, people that live on the other side of the White Bear that have a canoe and the skids. This isn't just a localized thing of just a few people that happen to deal with it every day, although that is in and of itself very important. Because how would you feel if you had to deal with this every single year, every single day with dogs barking? And where we're at today, and this is why I've gotten so frustrated with this issue, is because the discussion that we're having right now is not something that is born out of the last 12 months of deliberation, the last 24 months of deliberation. When I spoke at the last council meeting, I went through a chronology starting in 2007 and then went forward and illustrated that these complaints date back many, many years. I was incomplete when I made those comments, and our learned city staff was able to dig up some research for me. So this to me just underscores and helps inform my decision and why I have the position that I have. There were complaints of dogs running loose and excessive barking. Those are from the minutes of the Park Commission. June 21st, 2001. June 21st, 2001. Additional comments from the Park Commission in 2001, in 2005, in 2005. Back before it was a standardized and designated dog area for parks. So this isn't new, and after all these years of deliberation, after me personally spending a lot of time there since 2017 on the Park Commission, and then in recent years, at what point do we simply say, we've gone out of our way to try and throw money at it, throw accommodations, put fences up, put buoys up, put doggy bags there, try to increase enforcement, and if we've done that, and the complaints have only grown, and it's not that the conduct necessarily has gotten worse, but the volume of people using it, and therefore the volume of bad conduct, has gotten worse. And to me, it just is a no-brainer, and I grant you that if you're someone who's been using the dog beach for the last year and you think this is the greatest thing ever, you don't have the benefit of all that history, but I do, and I've tried to look at this as objectively as possible and to one of Councilmember Walsh's comments, because I received those comments too. Oh, why'd you have a public hearing? Your opinions were preordained. Well, no, I kept an open mind. I've just not seen anything change or improve since 2017. And I think we've just come to the point where it just needs to end. And I, like Councilmember Walsh, am committed to finding alternatives. I don't need an alternative in place in order to close it down, because if it's a problem today and it's worthy of closing down, then we should just simply do it and then accelerate as quickly as we can finding an alternative. I'll just end by saying this. If it stays open and we implement some of these changes, extend the buoys, try and add some enforcement, but it's not going to be dedicated to that area alone. We're still going to have barking dogs. We're still going to have dogs off leash. And we're still going to get calls. And as if all of that weren't enough, I have such a hard time knowing that police and CSOs inevitably are called and have to respond to this, knowing that it is going to divert those very important public safety resources away from the really important things. Now, they'll do it because they're dedicated public servants and they'll go where the calls direct them. But that's difficult for me to stomach, knowing that we could have prevented those calls and we could have just stopped some of this madness now. And effectively used our city resources in a better manner. So that's where I land on this, and that's why I strongly, strongly urge the council to close the dog beach. Any further discussion here? All right. Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I too have had an opportunity to reflect. I've tried to reflect deeply. I appreciate the time that we've had in between the public hearing and this evening. Where I come down, I think there's 4 things. Number 1, I am convinced that this is not an issue of public safety. We don't have a water quality issue. It's not an issue of public safety. Number 2, I am convinced that we have an issue with our leash laws, whether it's the structure or enforcement or some combination thereof. I think that is an issue worthy of more attention. We have conflicting practice. I think Councilman Walsh, your description, I was there that evening when Councilmember Jones was negotiating in the manner that you pretty accurately described. That jibes with my recollections as well. So I think there is room for more discussion on that. I have not been convinced by the evidence that has been presented to date. It's all anecdotal from the neighbors. I don't not believe it, but it is not enough for me to deny the use of a public amenity that we have at this time. I could get there, but I'm not there tonight. And I think I'm prepared to vote no on the motion in front of us, and then would be prepared to offer another alternative for our consideration after that. But at this point, I'm not compelled by the evidence that has been presented that the balance is quite right. And I am trying to find balance. I'm not sure that we have spent enough time looking at alternatives. I'm not sure that we have identified the specific issues of feasibility and availability. I was particularly moved by, struck by former Councilmember Fraser's letter to the press this last week, where he suggested we should engage with Ramsey County. Whether there is an opportunity for a similar amenity elsewhere in the county, maybe in White Bear, I don't know, but I thought that was worthy of exploration. So that's where I've come down for right now, and we'll see where the vote ends up.
Councilmember Edberg, can I ask you a question? Because you brought up Councilmember Frazier and him saying we should engage the county, and you were struck by that. Were you also struck by the fact that he said he was a council member in 2007 and supported this, and what it has become is not something that he would have supported at the time? The understanding when they designated this area as a dog beach was vastly different from what it is morphed into today, because I did find that compelling as someone who wants to go back and look at the record. Were you struck by that?
I noted it.
Fair enough. The other issue that I'd like to address, and this isn't just for Councilmember Edberg, but anybody who's inclined to keep it open, because I haven't come up with a good answer, at least not one that I would want to hear as the father of young kids. When there was a gentleman that testified here at the last council meeting and has written several emails recently and over the past couple of years about how he's had to restrain unruly dogs in order to protect his small children. And we keep it open, knowing that that will always be a continuing threat and possibility. How do I give him a fair justification? How do I square our decision with a dad who's just frustrated because we as a city are allowing this to happen and don't have it completely fenced in, and because it involves water, could never have it completely fenced in? And I don't mean to pick on you, Councilmember Edberg, but anybody who's in support of it. What do I say to that gentleman?
It exists all over the city anytime you have an unleashed dog. He is a wise parent for exercising caution, as all parents must exercise caution about children crossing streets and children being in environments. There's all kinds of, those are issues and risks. To the best of my knowledge, that's the only anecdotal experience that has been relayed to us. But there may have been others, I don't know. But that happens all over the world, all over the place. That's my reflection.
That's fair. Life involves risk. You get into an automobile, it's risk. I understand that. But there's a concentration. There's calculated risk. It's hard to avoid calculated risk when it's just in your own front yard. I mean, you can't avoid that, right? There are dangerous parts of the world.
In a public place. So the individual, the story that I'm recalling is that it took place in the swim beach area, or at the nexus between the dog beach and the public space, so it's in a public location.
That's fair. My understanding of that story, and I could be wrong, was because this gentleman lived a few houses in from Lake Avenue, that this did happen at or near his own property, was what I was told. He was talking about having to put himself physically between his children that were swimming at the 7th Street swim dock and the dog beach. In that particular instance, he wasn't in that area. And that's what concerns me, anecdotal or not. And I mean, everything's anecdotal. Every person who spoke on behalf of the dog beach was anecdotal. So I don't. That doesn't make sense to me. You're never going to have perfect facts and perfect statistical analysis. What I saw with my own eyes is anecdotal, but it also happened, and I wasn't lying, and I'm not lying now when I say I saw certain conduct. So I don't need an overwhelming body of evidence. I don't need this to be a weight of evidence. As I said, in 2023, and as I believe I said a few weeks ago, this is always going to be a 90-10, 95-5 popularity contest. I get that. But you have to give additional deference to the people that live near, not right next to, because the complaints have come from people that are much further out into the neighborhood, or people that don't even live in the neighborhood, but have canoes, kayaks, use the 7th Street swim dock, launch their boats there. And I don't know. I get that it's very tough to look at a crowd of people that want to keep something open and say something unpopular. That's just the reality. I think our charge is first and foremost to provide basic services like police, fire, ambulance, keep the roads in good working repair, provide clean drinking water. And yes, we want to provide parks. That's really important. But parks that override people's use and enjoyment of their own homes have to be given special consideration. And there's a hierarchy when it comes to parks, in my mind, or schools for that matter. Anything that's a public accommodation, a public perk, we'll say. Even if the perk is really, really good, if some of the bad stuff that is around it has a significant impact on private property, people's free use and enjoyment of their property, you have to take that seriously. And you can still land on the other side of the issue, I understand. But when I hear, I'm just not convinced, we need more evidence on this. I don't know what more evidence we could possibly have. We've been beating this to death for, well, if it started in 2001, 24 years is when it started. And they've only continued to grow. So my concern is that this conversation will never end, that we're still going to have these complaints, and we're still going to have a very large number of people that simply don't get to enjoy their property, not because we needed to put a school in that area, and sorry, you have to deal with the lights of the football stadium or cheering fans for a handful of Fridays. Not because this is just a traditional park with some swing sets and you have to deal with some children playing. There is no right to recreate your dogs in a body of water. It's a really great amenity, and I wish we could provide it, and I hope we can provide it somewhere else. But there's no right to be able to do that. And if the negative impact of that, however disproportionate to the popularity, is significant enough, then we have to suspend the amenity. I don't know how you come to a different conclusion than that. I just don't. So that's my thinking. Councilmember Engstrand.
Back to your deal, there is no leash law in Mataska Park, though. So even if you close the dog beach, the dogs still don't have to be on a leash.
That's the second part of the resolution for undesignating it as a designated area.
So, Mayor, you and I are not necessarily far apart in our thinking. For me, is your process and which comes first. I don't think we've looked hard enough at where the alternative location is. The argument has evolved and it's taken multiple forms over time. The most recent is it's in the wrong place. Okay? I accept that. I accept that that might be true and we should go looking for an alternative. So that will be my approach. But in the meantime, there were 100 visits by citizens representing this community, this body, who have also given us their documentation of experience, and that carries weight. So to suggest that it's all anecdotal, how, I don't know. 100 anecdotes from people who don't have a vested interest, okay? And having a vested interest is not a bad thing. I'm not unsympathetic.
I'm hesitant to go down this route, but I just can't help myself, quite frankly. You say don't have a vested interest, the Park Commission. Of course they do. I sat on it for 5 years. They have a vested interest in parks. They just simply have an opinion on it. I mean, so I get it, but their observations aren't the gospel truth. If we're going to go through credibility assessments, if we're going to weigh credibility and make credibility determinations, then there is no greater credibility than I will ever give to someone that lives there 24/7. And if it were one or two people, it would be different. Perhaps in 2017, it was a smaller group. In 2023, it really did grow. The breadth and depth of different people from around the community that came out in opposition and stated really good, valid reasons helped inform my opinion. I would say galvanize my opinion even more. But with all due respect to the Park Commission, and I appreciate their recommendation, and as I've thanked countless times for their hard work and dedication, I just simply disagree. We could play that game all day long. It was 6-0 against keeping the dog park open. So in other words, the Park Commission unanimously voted to close it in 2017. I made many visits that summer. I made many visits in 2023 and a bit last summer, and I can say it's only gotten worse. I won't single anyone out. Two of the people that were on the Park Commission were on the Park Commission in 2017 that were on it today. I believe they're approaching this issue with the best of intentions, but it's still just an opinion, and that's helpful. It's part of the body, but to say that that's better anecdotal evidence, I just don't buy it. People that live there every single day have the most credibility, because no one other than those that spend their entire life living near it are going to be able to attest to anything other than, at best, a couple-hour snapshot in time, even if it's every single day, which I doubt it. I doubt anyone spends 2 hours 7 days a week during the prime months. So great, you haven't had any bad experiences. I don't know how that's possible, because I've never had a situation where I didn't see a dog not on the leash. I had multiple occasions where dogs did defecate in the water. And to be clear, I'm with you on the water quality thing. I think you're probably going to have a higher concentration of a health issue at Optimus, where the E. coli, the different bacteria levels are higher. I get that. That doesn't mean it's okay. That doesn't mean it's not gross to see a higher concentration of dog poop in some area, even if it doesn't create a public health risk. I don't want to drag my kayak and step in dog poop. I don't want to go rig my sailboat. So that is an issue. Anyways, from a credibility standpoint, there is a balance that you have to weigh with that. And I don't, anything short of fully fencing in the area and making it so that dogs no longer bark will ever solve these complaints. They will always be ongoing. And I just am not prepared to say, as a matter of public policy, a dog beach, even though it's popular, is more important than the rights of private property owners and their free use and enjoyment of their property. That list of people seems to have grown, at least with this last taking up of the issue. I'm not prepared to say that. It's a valid opinion to say, I'd rather harm or inconvenience a handful for the benefit of many. That's an argument. I'm not prepared to make that. I'm especially not prepared to make that when the people that are living with it and dealing with it are the tax-paying residents of White Bear Lake. And as we saw from the petitions, as we saw from people that showed up, many of those dog beach users are not residents of the city of White Bear Lake. And my responsibility is to them first and foremost. And the popularity is what's accelerating so many of these problems. The popularity is driven by the fact that it is a destination in the Twin Cities. And it's not that I want to keep anyone out. I don't want to be exclusionary. But if their reason for coming to White Bear Lake is to use a dog beach that does have issues and does affect the residents of White Bear Lake, the folks that voted for me, then I don't care taking that amenity away. That's not my first concern. And we just know that that's the reality. I think you don't disagree, Councilmember Edberg, that you understand that this is no longer a good fit for that space. I don't want to put words in your mouth. There's no real doubt of that, but you want to find an alternative for all these folks. And that's fair. But finding an alternative doesn't take away the very real problem that exists today. So I say we alleviate the heartburn that it's causing first, and then we set about trying to find an alternative, which has no guarantees, by the way. I think the Ramsey County is a good idea. We did that in 2017. We looked around. Mark Birch was the city engineer at the time. We spent a lot of time trying to find alternatives. There was a note from either 2005 or 2001 where it sounds like they did the same. They considered the other side of the boat launch. They considered the other side of Manitou Island. and nothing seemed to be feasible. So I'm willing to take that up again, but that comes after we alleviate the problem that has existed, at least in one form or another, since 2001. Councilmember West.
I just wanted to be clear, there was 291 White Bear Lake residents who signed the petition to keep the park open. So they are tax-paying citizens. I just fundamentally
How many opposed it? I don't mean to cut you off. That's fair. How many opposed it?
Like what? I'm trying to figure out why.
Why what?
Why you're interrupting me? Can I go on?
You can.
Thank you.
Then I'll correct the
Thank you.
misleading statistic
Okay.
that you just cited.
So I fundamentally have an issue with closing a public amenity without having some sort of other resource available. There were a lot of people that came here with a lot of ideas, and maybe we have looked at them all. But I mean, the types of ideas were wide and varied. So I think that, you know, to me, I really think that engaging the community about like the dog park and maybe parks as a kind of a wider issue is something that I really want to see. And I know our priority is always safety and health of our community and the roads, but also we haven't really focused a lot on parks. And so if we could really do that in this upcoming year, I think that we could do something and find something that would work for most. I understand that it's going to be another year of concern, and we would have to update some of the things, and the neighborhood is not going to be happy with that, and I get that, and that isn't an ideal situation. And also, closing a public amenity without something else there is, I have a problem with that.
$736, I believe, was the opposing number. You said those were the residents, which that's a lot of residents, but it could be 500. It's still ones that are in close proximity that have to deal with it, and it's for those 291 residents that signed the petition that clearly like it. Many of whom have said, by the way, I don't use it. So okay. It's precisely for that I'm committed to trying to find an alternative. Those are two separate issues. It's a separate issue saying, should we as a council, should we as a city invest into parks, which I believe we should. That's why I spent 5 years on the council. That's why I think I've pushed for what we need to take parks seriously. And I'm fine doing that. But having that discussion is different than what currently exists today and whether there's a problem. Those are two separate issues, which is why, again, I'll say this is not about people that are pro-dog beach and anti-dog beach, pro-dogs and anti-dogs. It's whether or not we have a discrete problem that we have the ability to fix and alleviate the angst that it's causing for a good number of residents, and I say we do. And because that angst that it's causing is more compelling to me than people's enjoyment of using a dog beach, that's what we address today, and then we take up finding an alternative after. Councilmember Hughes.
Councilmember Edberg, what kind of evidence would convince you? I'm not trying to argue. I have sent dozens of pictures into the city. Dozens. And so I'm just wondering, which of those can I get back out and send to you?
So, dogs off leash. I agree. We have a leash issue. Let's get on that one. I'm on board with that. I'm coming to a different balancing point. The mayor has laid out his.
Yeah.
I've laid out mine.
So if all the dogs stayed on leash in that area, you'd have no problem with it. I'm not trying to argue. I'm just trying to understand.
I'm trying to find a way that we find a win-win, and it might not be possible, but I'm trying to invest in that.
Right. Okay, the only reason I'm hitting on the evidence is because I have spent I've sent so many pictures, and part of it started, it was last spring. The mayor said, hey, Lindy had requested the park commission to reopen this, I can't even put words in your mouth, and I can't speak, to look at this again, and would I keep looking at it, and would I take pictures of anything that I saw and send them in. And one of my kids had golf on Friday. I've told you all this, so sorry, but now I'm saying it for everybody else's benefit. Golf on Friday, and I would sit down there at the swim dock for about 3 hours every Friday, and it was about every 15 minutes. And I would send those pictures in about every 15 minutes. There were a couple conversations I would have with Lindy on the side about what was happening down there. There was a CSO down there at one point we were talking about, but it was real, it was happening, and so in terms of the evidence of what it is, whatever you'd like to see, I'm certain I have multiple photos of it. To get off of the she said, he said, I'm certain I have them. I'm certain I've sent them. I made some notes, and I don't want to sit up here and argue. I know you've already a lot of us already kind of have a direction we'd like to go, but beyond just the issues that we've heard about the neighbors, I hear from a lot of the park users because one, I'm there, but also they know who I am, and when when they have a complaint about what's happening down there, I am the person they go to about it, regardless if they live in my ward or they don't. So many of the people, or some of those groups spoke last time, but it is obviously the 7th Street dock parents who are down there, as the letter we got, and the neighbor who spoke. That's not a one-time. I have never had to wrestle a dog down, but certainly I get up frequently and make sure that my kids are safe. That's not just two of us parents that are doing that. So that's something that happens down on the 7th Street dock. And as an aside, actually, when the offer was made, well, why don't we just close both of them down? Mr. Walsh and I just had a discussion about, well, why don't we just take that up? Why don't we just take that and close the entire area down? And that's a win-win, right? That would be a win for the neighbors. We'll just get rid of that. We'll get rid of the dogs, and we'll get rid of the kids, and we've got no problem anymore. But talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The kids love it down there. I couldn't in all consciousness get rid of the swim dock in order to get rid of the dog problem. But it was really tempting. The other users down there, because it's a marina, are the people who rent the buoys. They pay to rent the buoys. Part of that payment goes for the upkeep of the Y dock. They're able to use the Y dock in order to tie up their sailboats, and we don't have any mechanism for keeping the dogs off of that. Or for keeping owners off of that to use as a method of throwing out dummies and balls out to their dogs. While keeping the dogs on leash might stop some of that, it won't actually stop all of it. The dog owners love walking the dock and throwing balls to their dogs. And outside of a CSO down there all day long, I don't see how that stops. That was one of the problems we had for the last few summers. And the first summer, that was when the city manager at the time said, don't enter into any conversation with people down there. Just call the police. Just call the police. That's what we were told to do. This was the way we were going to fix the problem. There were no notes taken by any police officers in terms of, like, I was called this day, and so then there was no evidence on hand of how many times the police had been called in order to go down there and address what at that point was, well, still, you had to have dogs on leash. And there was no There was no keeping the dogs on the leash, and then there was this two-sided battle of we were told to call the police, but the police weren't maintaining that information for us to go back and say, here's how many times this had to be stopped. Or even if we didn't call, the police were on a drive-by, how many times they got out of their car to go down there and speak to somebody. As another aside, how frustrating to find out this spring that, I mean, in 7 years, that we have no ordinance in place in order to, there was nothing for the police to do other than to walk down there and say, hey, put your dog on the leash. No tickets given, no warnings, no nothing, because there was nothing there. But I'm not sure how to put into words how frustrating that is to know, like, we were told to call the police and that something was going to be done, but actually nothing was ever going to be done because there was nothing there to do. I can't tell you how frustrating that is when the mechanism you're told to use doesn't actually exist. And just going into the frustration of the neighbors nearby, that, you know, we all get up here and say, well, you know, there's a leash law for that. There's an ordinance for that. There's a blah, blah, blah for that. We're going to stop that. Well, we were told to do something that was never going to do a thing. And at one point, I was even emailing with Ellen, this is awful. I am calling the police on my neighbors in order to put something on paper that isn't going on paper. I don't care about 99% of the people down there with their dogs. But what we were told to do was to create this database of information that wasn't even coming about. It just is awful. It's awful. That's just a segue that sucked. And doesn't make for friends. I mean, these are my neighbors who now won't talk to me, give me dirty looks, say cruddy things online. And it's not about having a thick skin and not being able to take it. It's about what the hell? And this wasn't caused because I wanted to be a jerk and be like, get your dog out of here. That was the mechanism we were given to fight back about something that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. The situation down there doesn't make sense, and that's what we were told to do, and it just created crap. Okay, so then you've got the Y dock that, for lack of a better term, is covered with dogs. And so you're over there, you're trying to get onto the Y dock off your sailboat in order to rig it up, and that, again, is a place that we have designated for that use, and it is being shared by dogs. So the swim dock is being shared by dogs. The Y dock is being shared by dogs. The skids where people have their dinghies is being shared by dogs because they are running around on there. The launch is also being shared by dogs. It is not nearly as common, but I have sent in those photos of dogs swimming around the launch from the dog beach, swimming around over to the launch while the owner is yelling from the beach, Harvey, 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 come back. I do have that photo. I don't know where it is. I know that I sent it in. Right there in front of the launch. It's a terrible spot. Can we go back, Mr. Copy, to the photo? So that is 4 different user groups down there that are sharing their space with the dog when the dog is not sharing its space well. So you've got a personal dock up there at the top, and the Y dock where a swim dock would be, and that red line, and then the Y dock would be right below it. And I guess I'm just trying to make the point that this is a very small area, and the dogs are outside of their bounded area into areas that other users have the right to, that we've given them the right to, the swim dock, the Y dock, the launch. And we haven't done our job of keeping the dogs in that place, and owners haven't done their job of holding on to their dogs to keep them into that space. And Councilmember West last time around asked the owners of the property nearby, why don't you put up a fence? And really the answer needs to be, why doesn't our fence work? And if our fence doesn't work, then it's not really a dog park. Every other dog park is 100% bound by fence because of this issue. Dogs don't stay in their area without the boundary, and of course they don't. They don't. And once you let them off the leash, which is what happens down there all the time, despite the fact that currently they're not allowed without leashes. So the 100 visits down there where our own park commission members are saying, it's great, the dogs are all off leash. That is against our ordinance. It's such a small area, and I know the point has been made. My only point being to add on to that, that's 4 different user groups that are impacted by sharing by the dogs. And, you know, to add one more thing about sharing, you know what we don't also have in this city? We don't have a dirt bike track. That's not a park we have. We only have one park that has disc golf. You can't do that in any other park. We've only got one little park that's got a little bit of a ramp for, thank you. Sure. We've only got one little area for skateboards. That's not available in every park. We've got no park, unless you can use it there, for rollerblades. We don't have a park for every single activity. We don't. So I'm not sure why that is a huge thing. Just a couple miles down the road, there is Otter Lake Dog Park. It is very big. It is properly fenced. It has actually 2 separate areas, big dogs, little dogs. You can run your dog to high heaven there. It's just on the other side of the Otter Lake Elementary School. It's glorious. So there is access to a dog park right next to us. So it's not as if we're saying no dog parks, no places to go. My other final, well, 2 others. I don't know anything about dog poop testing. I will say, though, that we're testing for human diseases in dog poop areas, and if we're really interested in testing, we probably ought to test for dog diseases that can be transferred to humans. I doubt we're going to do that, but I would think that would be the more useful thing to test for, rather than testing dog poop for E. coli. There's at least 5 or 6 different diseases, but I'm okay not testing it. You would like a dog park, possibly. Ms. West would like a dog park. I don't mind having a dog park, but not right here. And my problem with keeping it here until we find another one is what the council did in 2017. We're going to do this until we find another one. And then nothing happened. It went nowhere. I can't tell you how many times I've been told, sitting here at this dais, there's nowhere else to go. And so while I appreciate what you'd like to do here, and I mean, I'll tip my hand. I thought we owned a piece of property that's just south of Ramsey County Beach. Do we own it?
We own a couple, Mayor, Councilmember Hughes, we own a couple. One is a drainage that we technically actually don't have access to legally. We would have to go through Ramsey County. There's much more research that would need to be done that Mr. Coppy and I have been talking kind of offline about, depending on where tonight goes.
Gotcha. I didn't find that on my own, but somebody offered that to me because I was looking for a separate spot to go. And I will say my interest here is that I want to get rid of the dog park where it is, but nobody else is looking for a place. Nobody else has any incentive to do it. And so I would say, rather than keep this one open until we find another one, the incentive is not there to find a separate location. The incentive only comes when we close this one and say, you can't come here anymore. Let's go find another one. Otherwise, we're at status quo. And what you're saying is, no, this is fine. And that's how it feels to me. Is if you feel like this is fine, this is absolutely fine, really? But, okay, but I don't see how we say, I don't see how we vote. I don't know exactly how the resolution is voted. I don't see how we vote to not close this and think that we're going to have the proper incentive to find another location, because the incentive is not there for the users to find anything, and the incentive is not, frankly, there on the city to find anything on city staff without being battled down by me to go find it. So I would prefer that we close this area to dogs because it's not only because it's so crowded, but all the other user groups down there are impacted by it, all of them. Save the money on, another $10,000 worth of buoys and whatever fencing that would really be necessary in order to make this at least halfway decent, and spend some time finding it. Look at the spot that's just south of Ramsey County Beach. Apparently we own 2 different other locations along the lake that we could look at. There's another park over in South Shore that I don't know that would be viable, but those things only popped up within the last, honestly, 2 weeks when there was a little bit of momentum to close this. Where have these ideas been for 7 years? Nowhere. So I would just say if we could look at it and close this location and use the impetus of that to find a different one.
Okay. Any final thoughts on this? Councilmember West.
Yeah, I think the impetus, Councilmember Hughes, I think if we instructed the city staff to be looking at alternatives and also engaging the community more about kind of park priorities, I think that we could get there. I don't have a desire to keep a dog park in a place that continues to cause issues just to keep a dog park there. It is really about kind of the public amenity piece. The other thing I just wanted to ask about, because it was brought up by a couple of people, was sort of the issue of conflict of interest. And I think I'm clear on that, but I just wanted to make sure that people understood the conflict of interest and how that works with council members who had personal impact on a decision. And I asked the city manager to talk to our attorney to talk about that, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor and Council. So yeah, I was asked about Councilmember Hughes' involvement in this. Obviously this is a bit more personal to her, just given her where she resides and the connection she has with the dog beach. But it's not a disqualifying interest that would require a council member to recuse themselves. That really only arises a per se conflict in that situation if there's a financial interest at stake. Here, this is a policy call. Again, it certainly may be more personal to her than to others, but that doesn't disqualify her from participating in the discussion or voting or anything like that. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there a valid concern that someone had a conflict over this issue? Councilmember West.
It literally came up in several different people had that type of question, and I just didn't have the exact answer for it. So this was really clarifying for the community.
That's fair. So you were answering the questions of constituents. Very good. That's fair. Any further?
Fair?
Well, I was trying to hold back, though.
Mr. Mayor, just on that point.
Okay.
There's no conflict of interest. It's actually an absurd question. Actually, Councilmember Hughes sending me emails about this issue before she was on the council. And so for her to recuse herself, we have 5 wards. We're not a very big city. The wards are small. It's a huge issue for her ward. So we're going to leave the Ward 2 unrepresented because she lives near it. It's not even close. So I just want to be on the record saying I'm glad the attorney agrees. It's not even close. Let's vote.
I agree with you. Okay. I have a motion and a second for a resolution terminating the dog beach operations at Mataska Park. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
A vote of 3-2, the motion fails. The resolution fails. All right. We have another resolution before us, and this one is a resolution approving continued operations of the dog beach located at Mataska Park and ordering improvements. Council, what would like to do with this? Or would someone like to make a motion on this resolution? Councilmember Edward.
I'm not seeing a particular need for us to take action since my understanding is that our last action is binding until changed. So I'm not seeing a need for us to take another act. As our presiding officer, I'll take your cue on when you might entertain a motion to launch an investigation into where we might find an alternative site with the goal of moving the existing dog park.
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, although the previous resolution failed, even those that supported keeping open the dog beach recognize that there are very valid concerns, that at a minimum, what we currently have, hopefully we can do better. So do I personally think this is the correct solution? No. I think the idea of repealing the dog leash requirement is ridiculous. I think you're just going to exacerbate the problems. In fairness, in 2017, I thought it was ridiculous when Councilmember Jones said, let's have 30-foot leashes. I think the whole area was never going to work. So this resolution was brought to the council, and as the presiding officer, I want to offer it to this body, and this body can do whatever they'd like with it, including it not getting a second, or if those are inclined to move it, they can do so. Depending on how that goes, and through some discussion, which I think we can have, we can decide whether or not to table this issue in its entirety, and look at alternatives and all the things that go with it. But that's where we're at today. This, in fairness to the Park Advisory Commission, they did put all this work in, and though I disagree with it staying open, this is their recommendation, and we ought to at least be responsive to that recommendation and not ignore it in its entirety. So with that, we have a resolution before us. I'd entertain a motion to approve. I'd entertain a motion to table this.
So, Mayor, I might be thinking way off in a different space, but if we actually take a motion that passes 3-2 to support, that becomes a motion that you can veto, which then requires 4 votes to override. So I'm not, I might be playing parliamentary games in my head, but I'm not interested in playing that game. So
I'm sorry to cut you off. That's fine, but you've said the word game 3 times. That wasn't in my head, and I'm not setting anybody up for a veto. So if that's the line of analysis you're going down, let me just dispel that right now. I would have, you can pass this or not. I haven't thought about whether I would veto it. If it was moved and seconded, I would be lobbying very heavily for, at a minimum, removing the repealing of the leash requirement, and I would listen to my colleagues, and I would advocate accordingly. And if it did pass, I found it in my prerogative to consider a veto, which I haven't and didn't until you said that, that would fall to the mayor's office to decide to do so. But I haven't considered that, and if and when this is motioned and seconded during the discussion, I will say for a third time, and maybe in more detail, I don't think repealing the leash requirement is a good idea as a matter of public policy.
I'm still not seeing the need to act to reaffirm an existing position.
And that's a fair comment. And that's one of the 5 council members' opinion. Would anyone else like to move this? And if no one wants to do anything, then we'll move on. It will simply fail for lack of even a motion.
Mayor, may I weigh in here just quickly?
Please.
Thank you. I believe the reason that the dog leash requirement, repealing that from that resolution adopted in 2017, is to align with municipal code. The city code allows an off-leash area in Matoska Park right now. So that, I'm just clarifying for everyone who may be listening that that's the reason why that's in there, which would align with city code. That, as Ms. Hughes said, that is a huge deal right now, that our code does not align with the park rules. So either one should be amended. This was the recommendation of the Parks Commission. If you wanted to amend municipal code, then we probably need a different resolution or to amend this resolution.
Councilmember West.
This is just a request to put what the resolution actually is back up on the screen so we can see it.
Councilmember Walsh.
Well, I have no interest in the other resolution. I think there's a consensus on looking for alternative locations. I don't know, I guess I'd ask the city manager, do you need us to formally ask you to go do that? Because you're going to take up staff time and energy on it. I mean, I would support them. If you needed a motion like that, that's an action we could take. If you don't need a motion to do that and we all just sort of agree and that's the sense of the council and you guys can act, that'd be fine too with me.
Mayor, to answer Councilmember Walsh's question, I think it would be appropriate, given kind of where the council is at on this, to direct staff through a motion. You don't need a resolution to direct my office and then staff to look at other alternative locations. But I would, if you wanted the Parks Advisory Commission involved in that, they should be included in that motion too.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think that's one direction we can take, and I'd happy to make that motion as sort of laid out by the city manager, including the Parks Commission, and it can be broad enough so that staff can sort of take it where they go.
Mr. Walsh, would you be willing to hold that motion for a moment?
Absolutely.
So we have a number of topics coming in front of us, and even in our current moments. We have, and they all center around our vision for parks and trails. I'll speak up. How's that?
Thousands of people are watching this right now.
I know.
They need to be able to hear you.
So we have a large number of issues around parks and trails that are emerging in our community. We've spent most of the last 5 years on issues of public safety. I have no issue with that. I'm glad we did it. I'm interested in asking the question, is there a different way, or as we prepare for our comp plan activities in another couple of years that are down the road, one of the sections of our comp plan deals with parks, trails. I don't remember, there's a third one, the third item in there. It's not waterways, but it's along those lines. But we have issues of urban forestry. We have issues of cutting down trees in parking lots. We have issues around these locations. I was intrigued by the idea that if we were to relocate the dog beach and possibly, maybe not, the 7th Street swimming area, that we could alter and increase the service for other users of that space. And I don't know what to think about that. I would welcome some additional thought around parks in general. The lead issue for me would be an alternative for the dog beach, but there are other things along those lines. And so there is a part of, at our work study session a month ago, the topic of a comprehensive plan for, well, not the comprehensive plan, but a little c comprehensive plan for parks was raised. And I have just been thinking that there's a number of issues that could be resolved, not by looking at the small piece, but by putting multiple pieces on the table. But I emphasize the first one in my mind is alternative locations for the dog beach. And so the question that I would pose is, can we actually take our eyes up to the horizon and not necessarily down at the ground and think about, is there a direction to staff that incorporates the dog beach and these other issues? That's where my brain wants to go. Now, that's just me, and takes at least 3 of us, preferably more, to get to a decision on that.
My comment, I think both of them make sense. I think they're separate issues. I mean, they're sort of intertwined, but my concern with that is we have a discrete issue and valid concerns that everybody recognizes we ought to try and address. And then what you're suggesting, which I'd be all for, some actual kind of global planning for parks, is a bigger issue that will take more time and resources, and I don't want an alternative to this site to get swept up in what could be an 18-month, 2-year process. So I think they are separate, and both have merit, but I would urge us to go forward with those individually. And we can do both of them tonight. You can still direct staff to do that, but they're separate. And priority 1 would be finding an alternative. And Councilmember Walsh, because you haven't made the motion, I would suggest that if it truly is the intent to find an alternative, then a motion to that effect of an alternative or a replacement to the Mataska Dog Beach, so that it's clear we're not trying to add one.
Get another one.
This is to move it to a different location, which I think is the intent of the council, is not to those that are in favor of it, is to move it, not add an additional.
Move it or end it.
Move it or end it. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I guess I'm not against the broader look, and I think our Parks Commission, that's sort of their mission, isn't it? I mean, they should be doing that anyway in long term, and, you know, bringing us ideas and reviewing all that. But I think we need to really focus on this issue with all the discussion we've had here and all the community involvement. And I like what Councilmember West says about engaging the community. I think that's a key thing. We heard a lot of ideas, a lot of very interesting ideas, creativity, so we got to keep doing that. I'd say let's keep it narrow, and then I'm not against the broader look as also. I think we should maybe set a time limit on it, our work. I mean, so whatever you think might be reasonable, city manager, you know, end of the summer, fall, October, whatever, some kind of date like that is what I'd be thinking. So let's not spend 2 years on this. Let's not let it get lost. Let's do some work. You know, back of the napkin math on what cost might be or what look at without you know, getting an appraisal or anything that spends money, but we can kind of look at some options. So let's say October 1.
I'll defer to, okay, October 1, I'll defer to staff on timing, but if I'm hearing you correctly, this is more than just a, hey, we've identified a site. We want a pretty robust proposal, including at least some rough estimates, so that we're not saying, yeah, let's now start exploring what this looks like. We want it somewhat fleshed out. I mean, and it doesn't have to be, this doesn't have to be all at once. There can be touch points along the way. We do talk about things and have updates.
You're speaking very, very optimistically, like we're going to identify. I don't know that we're going to find an alternative.
I don't know if we're going to identify one either.
It's about exhausting pieces of land and in the city. That's the kind of review I'm looking for. I don't know that we're going to find something and get a proposal back. I don't think it's that easy.
I completely agree. But I don't think it hurts us in a motion or a direction to staff that you don't need to wait until the deadline if an alternative site is discovered as feasible, to set about saying, all right, it's going to cost X amount for some buoys, we got some fencing, so that you're not saying, here's an address, what do you think? It's here's an address and a proposal for fencing and a rough estimate of cost, so we have something to go on. Is that effectively your motion?
Love it.
Okay. Councilmember Edberg.
So I'm amenable to the suggestions that are being made. I could picture some aspects of the review of the feasibility study, if you will. There may be some need for water testing of potential sites. There might be a need to spend some money, not lots and lots, and certainly not along the lines of the major capital investments that we were discussing moments ago. but I don't want anybody to be surprised or, down the road say, we never said ding, 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 whatever. So is that spirit?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
So do you want to form that, Member Walsh?
Well, I hope I have.
Well,
all the different pieces.
Or articulate it so we can all make sure we have a sense of
I
what
like
we're...
feasibility study of options to move the dog beach to another location, get some information back by October 1. What else? Yeah, obviously, like, earlier as possible. It's just kind of a deadline. If I got everything.
Clarifying question, Mayor.
Please.
Is this feasibility study within city limits or along White Bear Lake?
I don't think we limit it to within city limits. I think if there's a Ramsey County option.
Maybe I should have phrased that
except
better.
We can't, our guys can't be out.
I think the question was, it doesn't have to be on White Bear Lake. It could be in the city.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to be on White Bear Lake.
Okay.
No.
Consensus?
Okay, I have a motion to that effect. Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, I'm sorry.
Could
go
I
ahead.
just say for the record, if we could look at what it would look like across the other side of the launch, definitely what it would look like south side of Ramsey County, what those other couple pieces of properties were like, that we actually exhaust those and think about them so that I can say with all, to myself and to everyone else, we have looked at that and it's better, it's worse, and it is specifically because of these reasons that people can have a discussion about. I just wanted that on the record.
Councilmember Edberg.
And I would add to that other parks that we might already have. I'm picturing Handlos, maybe Varney, maybe some others. I spent time this weekend going around with a couple of our parks commission members, visiting sites that they had talked about. They would not describe their recommendations as a feasibility study. It was a general assessment, an idea, intellectual tire kicking is what I would put it more in the spirit of. But other locations that have water, they do not need to be in our community. And I would include a discussion with Ramsey County to find out, is there something outside of our community that might also be an acceptable location that could be developed. All options are acceptable to me.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I'm going to clarify before we're done, one more time, Mayor, that there's no guarantee here that we will find anything.
Right.
What?
There's no guarantee. So I just want to be clear with everyone who's watching that we will do our due diligence. We are not a consulting firm. So we will do our best. It will not be a formal several this thick of a report, but we will do our best without exhausting a lot of city funds. Thank you.
Very good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Staff is so directed. Good luck. Councilmember West.
Yeah, can I ask a question about the changing of the municipal code for the dog leashes? Because, I guess if we're really thinking that not having dog leashes in that area is going to make it even worse, I'm not, do we need to change the municipal code to make sure, I sounded Minnesotan there, so that the dog leash requirement in that part matches what the code is? So like if we have a code that's for dog beaches within the city of White Bear Lake, or dog beach at this location needs to, the dogs need to have leashes. There's a question.
Sure, Mayor and Council, thank you. From what I'm hearing, it sounds like there was a resolution passed back in 2017 establishing a rule at the dog park about having leashes on your dogs when you're inside of the designated area, but that rule's inconsistent with the code. And if you want to have teeth to any kind of rule, if you want to enforce a rule, you have to have it in your city code, because I think Councilmember Hughes pointed this out already tonight. You can call the police all day long on people for doing things that might be inconsistent with a resolution, but unless it's codified, unless it's expressly in your city code, you can't write them tickets. You can't do much other than tell them, hey, the council would prefer you didn't do this. So I think it would be a relatively simple code amendment to include language to that effect consistent with the resolution into your city code. It would just take some time. Staff would have to put it together, and then of course you have to have 2 readings for ordinances, and then it would have to be published before it could take effect. But that's certainly the council's prerogative if you want to direct staff to work on that.
I mean, I think we need to plow forward ahead with that. We had issues, feedback from law enforcement saying they were handcuffed to enforce this, pun intended, because that's their job, is to enforce the law, and the law is unclear. So let's correct it. And if it's the will of the council to say we don't want to, we want to allow people to not have leashes, that's fine. I don't think it is. So let's add the teeth to it. And I think staff will come back when working with the city attorney. But it looks like in 2007 that stretch of Mataska Park was designated as a designated area, and in the code we define that designated area as a place where dogs can be off leash. So we just need to narrowly tailor that to make it clear that in that particular designated area you have to have a leash or carve it out. So I think we need to do that. Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I would support us taking up that issue sooner rather than later, preferably before, like, soon. I wouldn't necessarily frame it around how do we gain coherence with the existing ordinance. That might be the right approach. I'm open to other ways of thinking about leashes and leash requirements in general, and does our whole overarching policy need reconsideration for us to address the issues that have shown up in this conversation. So I'm just saying, I don't know what that would be. It's been a long time since we've had that debate, that discussion. I don't remember all the ins and outs of it. So I'd come at it from a standpoint of how do we enhance public safety, how do we, et cetera, and what kind of language do we need in order to achieve the outcome that we've been seeking here. And I don't know, maybe that's as simple as coherence. I don't know.
Yeah, unless we want to go back and reinvent our leash law citywide, which I don't think we do. I think this is a pretty discrete issue. Okay. And if it's the public policy charge of the council is to say, have an enforceable leash ordinance and rule as it pertains to the dog beach at Mataska Park, we can keep it as simple as that, and then we'll defer to the city attorney and staff to wordsmith it as they see fit. Okay. I don't think we need anything formally.
Can I just one more time?
Yeah.
I think I wasn't perfectly listening, so I was trying to find it myself. You said that at some point this council designated part of Mataska Beach. I need to see that, because I don't, as part of this, did we actually do that? So I need to see that as we do this discussion.
You designated, the council at the time in 2007 designated 3 areas in the community. Hanlows in Lakewood Hills, Varney Lake Park, and Matoska Park. The waterfront
I'm just saying,
ramp.
when you do this research, bring those forward. Bring the motion forward.
But that's what, yeah, if I can ask tonight.
See it in the code.
Yeah, that's all.
I will do that. If I could ask tonight so we can prepare language, would you like all 3 areas to be removed? Or just Matoska?
I don't
ask me.
I think this is a discrete issue that requires a discrete response. So before we change things that have not been an issue, then we keep it to Mataska.
Okay.
That would be my suggestion, and I'm not seeing any pushback. So let's do that. I think we got it clear, and we'd like that at the next council meeting because we're going to have multiple readings. So that'd be great. Okay, thank you. Councilmember West. Just trying to march through this agenda.
I know.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify and make sure that so we're not moving forward with the Parks Commission recommendation.
Correct.
This time.
So no new sign, okay.
Very good. Item 8A, under new business, construction plans for downtown parking lots. Mr. Copy.
All right, let me flip some pages around here. We've had all evening for that. Mayor, members of the council, at our February 18th workshop, we brought back to council to discuss the downtown mobility and parking study, and council directed staff to bring back a proposed parking lot project for consideration in 2025, contingent upon the project being financed through city fund balance to allow that work to happen in 2025. So the 4 lots I'll kind of go through. So Lot 1, located at 3rd and Banning, was built in 1964. Basically, we would continue with the existing layout. It requires full reconstruction, pretty poor condition. That's kind of the Market Fest lot. Really no opportunity to create any additional parking spots. A number of years ago, 10 years ago or so, the city hired a consultant to look at different options, and there's basically the layout that's there is the one that provides the most parking. Lot number 2, located at 5th Street and Banning, was built in 1974. This is the parking lot behind Ace Hardware. There is an option to provide a revised layout contingent upon removing the 4 mature oak trees. And that also would require full reconstruction if we do that. If council did not want to explore adding the additional parking, we could potentially get by with a little bit less than a full reconstruction. As some of the curb is in decent condition, others would need to be replaced. Lot 2, that was the what was shown in the mobility study. Caveat is that it was not universally supported. It was kind of lukewarm just due to the impact of cutting the trees down in order to gain that parking. Lot number 3 is located at 5th and Cook, built in 1984. Existing layout would be maintained, minor curb repairs, full pavement replacement, small lot, basically just mill and overlay and kind of get in and out. Just part of the kind of the downtown parking areas. Lot 4, located at 3rd and Cook, behind the Armory, was built in 1987. This we could do, and I'll get to a couple of maps here in a minute, but slightly revised layout and generally full reconstruction in areas. We'll be able to save some of the curb, but it's kind of a 50-50, so kind of more hinging on that full reconstruction. So the existing conditions we have, those are the layouts of the 4. One thing I'll get into in a little bit here too is that when we go in and reconstruct these, we will look at current ADA accessibility requirements and what stalls. So as we get in, these are I'll call it the first kind of rough draft that we've gone into. We've not done the actual construction plans yet, but we will have to look at ADA van accessibility stalls for our parking. It's based on the number of stalls in each of the lots. So the total may go up or down by 1 or so, just to provide that van access aisle. Obviously, if we can engineer it and squeeze it in and not lose a stall, we will definitely do that. But to meet current ADA requirements, so we would need to do that. So proposed conditions. The 2 I will focus on are the Lot 2 in the upper left-hand corner. That is the Ace, the parking lot behind Ace. The 4 green spots are the trees that would need to be taken down, large mature oak trees. The area in red hatching would be that area again to take a look at different layouts. That is what's shown there today is that layout is one option. We really, staff sat down here about a week ago and really need to get somebody in and hire a consultant to do some options for us, just to get their expertise at it. They are much doing it every day. They definitely may have different ideas as how to most efficiently lay that out. The other we'll touch on quickly is the parking lot number 4, the one behind the Armory. We have the to get rid of a couple of old parking islands that not sure really why they were there, if they were small trees that were planted there at one time trying to save something, but there's nothing in those areas. And the green space provided meets city zoning code, so we're good there. We can remove those, we can add about 4 stalls to do that. Again, once we get into the engineering drawings, we'll lay it out and know that exact number, but we believe we can gain a couple of stalls. Estimated cost from the downtown mobility study, just over $1.7 million to do that. That again includes some contingency in there, not knowing what level and what amenities that we would be constructing in there. Also would include that we would use some consulting services to do that work, whether we do partially in-house and partially consulting. I think we need some consulting services. Like I mentioned, the option to do the different layouts for the ACE lot, I think is a valuable use of that resource. The other expertise that we will need to reach out, likely the same consultant, is to look at lighting for us, to make sure that we have the proper amount of coverage and locations for those lights and wiring. We are not experts at wiring or electricians here, so we would need to hire them for that as well. Again, this is assuming that, and I'll get into the schedule next, but this is assuming that we would fund this through fund balance out of the pavement management fund. Project schedule. So this is kind of, we're at kind of the drop dead date. If we don't move forward now, likely it could not be a 2025 project, barring the amount of work that needs to be done to get plans done, all the details, get it bid. So really we would look at maybe bringing back a preliminary plans if we do some draft layouts for the ACE lot, that we would try to bring that back in April so that we could, council could approve plans in May to move forward with bidding a project. The construction would start immediately following Market Fest. This would be the Monday following the last Market Fest. So basically trying to avoid conflicting interest in that route. We've had discussions with the Market Fest folks over the last several years, and from a parking lot schedule standpoint, whether it be this year, it makes sense obviously to do it based on schedule after Market Fest. If we delay the project and council's not comfortable moving forward with this funding approach or schedule, we definitely could do it as a spring project before Market Fest, or split it up, depending on how much work, potentially, a couple parking lots before, a couple parking lots afterwards, but still definitely doing it before we get into doing the streets, especially south of 4th Street. So those 2 parking lots, the Armory lot and the Market Fest lot, to definitely do before we do the streets. The 2 to the north, more so proposing it from an economy of scale to do it as a larger project, hopefully to get better bids.
Mr. Coffey, can we, although it's not in your PowerPoint, can you go over the public realm kind of piece?
I was going to go over that here before we get into, but I can, let me jump back. All right, so public realm. So I have some notes on that too here. So from a lighting standpoint, so there's 3 kind of elements of the public realm that we want to touch on that would be, or to some extent, incorporated into this project. Lighting, some of the colored concrete amenities, and signage. So we could take them one by one. Like I said, we would really need to have a lighting expert come in and assist us. We do have acorn-style lights that we have throughout downtown. Starting to do a little bit of research. we really have, we can maintain that style. We obviously have a lot of infrastructure north of, or 4th Street into the north that have the acorn-style lights. We can definitely switch styles, maybe not recommended unless we're looking at a project to do something to the north later, but there's definitely different options to provide the recommended downlighting that the mobility study represents. So if you look at our current globes on our acorn, they really cast a lot of light upwards and outwards, not necessarily down to the pavement where it is recommended to be, both from a pedestrian standpoint as well as a safety from a traveling motorist. So if you look at even like a freeway, you have the big freeway lights, they cast all the light down on the pavement so that you can see line striping, you can see crosswalks, you can see, it's become more than just a decorative element in areas. So
I'm going to add to that. That's also, I think, a requirement in the proposed zoning code for parking lots would be to that downcast lighting. And so you could think about it as the lights that we have along the Lake Avenue Trail or the Lake Links Trail or the Mark Sather Trail that we have could be similar lights that we use in parking lots, which can complement the acorn style along streets. So it doesn't mean they necessarily have to be the same. Right?
Yeah, and that's definitely some options that we would have that consultant bring to the table. Again, we're not experts at it. We don't look through lighting catalogs every day, so they do, and definitely bring that expertise to the table. I will also state that we had some conversations come up during the study, and as briefly mentioned in it, that there was kind of a 50-50, but there was a lot of desire. People like the bronze color. Obviously, the green is what is downtown and a lot of the different amenities. So more the council would want and that's an easy kind of last decision, but something to think about. That's the theme that we want to continue. It's obviously throughout a lot of our downtown area, and maybe something that we want to maintain versus trying to spend a lot of time repainting or rebranding that in a lot of other areas downtown. The second item I'm going to cover quickly is colored concrete. The mobility study definitely calls it out as that kind of uniqueness to lay out really where pedestrian ways are meant to be. I'm going to use Washington Square for an example, that you definitely try to keep the say the standard color concrete for the pedestrian way, and then you have kind of borders and things that may be in colored. Right now, the downtown area primarily uses a red concrete. There is a little bit of the colored concrete in the parking lot areas. To that habit are the Ace lot and the Market Fest lot, the 3rd and Banning. So those two lots do have some of the elements in the back areas, and as we get the plans laid out, we will look at whether or not there's opportunity to accent different areas with that colored concrete to more so designate where people should be walking. And is utilized elsewhere in downtown, so it would make it more consistent. So that's the other element. The last element that I'll bring in and is in the memo is parking lot signage. One of the big things with the current layout is we don't have a lot of signage that designates these are public parking, how many stalls there are, that kind of stuff. But not having gone through a full kind of branding study, I'll call it, of the downtown and what we might do for a full wayfinding and what do we want these signs to ultimately look like. Fairly inexpensively, we can do I'll call it more of a street sign style, fairly cheaply to at least designate their public lots. So they're easier to find, and then as we get into the street project, and it will include areas outside of that, the core area that we're reconstructing, because obviously we want to get people to all of our parking lots. So that marketing and branding and wayfinding would be a much broader topic. We can always replace these signs at a later date once we settle in on that, once we kind of design the street project and bring in an expert to really look at what that looks like. So those are the three public realm elements that we would, at least to some extent, bring in. Obviously, a lot more decisions as we get into the streetscape out in the next phase of the project. So, again, and I'm going to go to the recommendation page here, but again, this council requested staff bring back a proposal to potentially do a project. You've had, a month or so to think about this. Obviously, this uses city funds. We talked a lot about different options from assessments or impact fees, impact zones, or parking zones, parking meters, different ways to fund these. Obviously, some are after the fact funding mechanisms. Assessments or anything that we would charge directly to the property owners would be something that would delay the project. So with that said, staff brought before council a resolution to consider that would order plans and specifications for the downtown parking lot project in 2025. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Coppy. I'm just going to rattle off a couple clarifying things. So first, whether we approve this tonight or not, these parking lots have run their useful life and are going to need to be repaired pretty quick here.
Correct.
Okay. And if we don't move forward on doing the parking lots in 2025, we're going to delay the broader downtown reconstruction project, street reconstruction, because this does have to happen first in 1 year to then be followed by that broader construction project the following year for construction logistical purposes.
Mayor, members of the council, to get in and do the, again, I stated it in my presentation, but the two parking lots, the Market Fest lot and the Armory lot are directly in that construction area, the street construction area. The two lots to the north, the one on 5th and Cook and 5th and Banning, could theoretically be phased before or after. As we met with other communities that were doing these downtown projects, there's 100 ways to phase this. We could do, like I said, say you move forward with a spring project and you could do, two parking lots before Market Fest. You could, we talked to the Market Fest group, and, whether we shorten the Market Fest by a few weeks, you could theoretically do part of a street project and do a 2-year street project. So there's a lot to go into this next street piece of it. Once we start talking to the businesses and how we phase it, what kind of entrances, how, what's really feasible to get constructed in a time frame that we're not going to dismantle the downtown and inconvenience them too much. We can't tear up every street all at once, because that's a lot of parking too. It's parking lots are one thing, but the on-street parking is a vital piece of it when you consider Market or Washington Square, Clark Avenue. That's a lot of parking as well. So we'll have to phase that regardless. So I think if we don't move forward with the project this year, I think there are still options to start that work in the spring of 26.
And still complete the downtown street reconstruction project by the end of the construction season in 2026.
Mayor, members of the council, I will say that more detailed look will need to be due. I believe we can start it. The project area that we're talking about does extend, I'll call it, to the fringes of the, I'll call it the core business area. Theoretically, we could look at doing those at a different time. Those could be done in the spring as well and not affect, they're more residential areas, but they're, again, those small fringe areas that are just outside of the downtown core business area. So there's a lot of looking that would need to be done as far as how the perfect phasing of it. But I still think it's going to end up being a 2-year project.
Okay. So I appreciate all that detail. I think what I'm getting at is it makes it a lot more difficult if we don't get these parking lots done in 2025. It makes it a lot more difficult to move forward and finish the broader project in 2026.
Mayor, members of the council, it's still, once we get into the details of it, it still may be a 2-year street project, even if we,
Okay, I'm
not looking
following
into
you,
that detail yet. I can't guarantee
Yeah.
that we can do it in one construction season.
Okay, all right. So the funding mechanism, the memo says that there really is no assessment mechanism available for public parking lots. We've talked about that at work sessions. So unlike when we do a street reconstruction project, we take linear footage and you have a formula for that. There's not really a comparable mechanism for parking lots, meaning how do you take one business's proximity to a parking lot, one restaurant that's bigger than another, a clothing shop, a sewing shop, a hairstyle, and deduce what their proportionate share of the assessment should be. Is that a fair characterization?
The formula definitely becomes more complex based on proximity, use. A lot of it has to do with zoning, not necessarily current. Things can, businesses can change. Hairstylists today can be a restaurant tomorrow, depending on what's allowed through the zoning code. So it's really what's allowed, kind of the allowable uses versus what's. So that's where the complexity comes into coming up with that formula.
Okay.
And and I had mentioned it in our work session as well as in memos. The benefit appraiser that we work with has had a difficult time finding comparables to try to lay it out. We have done it. I will characterize that we have done it in the past in the downtown area. They were petitioned for, so it was a different scenario than us initiating the project.
Okay. And finally, if this resolution is approved tonight, we're not approving any specific plans, meaning authorizing cutting down the trees tonight. We're going to move forward with a more drilled down version, or is that what we're approving tonight? Is cutting down the trees?
Mayor, members of the council, as far as our design goes, that's the direction that we would move forward with a engineering design of that parking lot. Would be to look at removing the trees and doing a parking lot layout that would take the trees down and add the additional parking.
Okay, understood.
So that's feedback that we would like to receive tonight, just regarding that specific lot. Okay.
That's why I asked. It wasn't clear whether we're doing that or whether there was going to be an ability to tweak that down the road. And I want to be clear. It's not an easy decision. I support taking the trees down, not because I think the trees are bad. I think we constantly have a conversation regarding parking and lack thereof. And I've never supported putting a ramp in. I think that doesn't make any sense. But as we look for very, very few opportunities to add some parking, this is a viable opportunity, and I'm confident that we will replace those trees with, albeit smaller trees, in other areas of the community. We've been a tree community for many decades. I think we'll continue to do that, but this is just a practical decision in my mind to take the trees down. And I think we get 17, 18 spots, something like that.
I'm going to say 15 to 18, depending on, again, we'll have to look at the layout, the circulation lot, but that was the initial look at from I'll call it the layout that one of the options that we looked at.
And there'll be a median in that lot where we are going to add a nice, at least 10-foot wide chunk of green space, which presumably will be trees or other vegetation. Is that correct?
That is correct. We would have, in each of the parking lots, we'd look at opportunities to replace trees or add trees where we can.
Very good. Okay. Well, I'm eager to get going on the broader downtown reconstruction project, and I know that started really pre-COVID, and then it got delayed with COVID. We've been promising members of the downtown area with some of the states of disrepair, at least with regard to lighting, that we're going to put a Band-Aid on it, and we don't want to put a lot of money into fixing lights that we're going to tear down. And we've been limping it along for a long time. And I want to move forward with that, and I see this as a necessary predicate to doing that, hopefully in 2026, although our city engineer has amply disclaimed that it might not all get done in 2026, but it's not even going to start, really, in earnest in 2026 if we don't move forward with the parking lots in 2025. So for that reason, I support this resolution. And Council, what would we like to do? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of technical questions and then a financial question. So as you, Mr. Copy, as you picture phasing the parking lots, are you going to rip up all 4 at the same time, or are you going to rip up one and then do them serially, or how much of those 200 and something parking spaces are going to be out of commission at one time? In the way that you think about it right now?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, yes. I don't have
no.
I don't have an exact answer for you right now. As we look at the extent of improvements, the Armory lot and the 5th and Cook lot, obviously the smaller of the 2 lots, are going to be fairly in and out. Curb replacement in areas, we're moving some of the medians. We can do those and not, I'll call it, take away all the parking all at once. The Ace lot and the Market Fest lot, or the 3rd and Banning lot, will have significant impacts. We will be taking out all the curb for the most part. We will have quite a bit of lost parking during that time frame. Obviously, it's a August, September, October, 3 months to get it done. It's going to be all hands on deck from whatever contractor bids it, but there will be, we anticipate significant disruption.
Okay. I guess we're warned. In the public realm, I did not disagree with any of the 3 items that you raised. Any landscaping at all involved in parking lot renovation?
Mayor, members of the council, so if you look at each of the lots, again, go back to the maps. So the 5th and Cook lot is a very small lot. There's no medians. There's just some boulevard trees. So there's really nothing to do there. The lot behind the Armory at 3rd and Cook, there was some opportunity to replace a lot of trees that were planted. There were evergreen trees. There were all kinds of odd ones that were planted, and proximity to the house that was removed, we really didn't have anything planted in that boulevard because they had a hedge around the property. So there's some opportunities to add some additional perimeter trees, as well as re-landscape I think there's only 1 tree maybe that's worth saving in that median or current median. So we definitely would look at, we obviously have to balance that with where the lighting goes. You can't do a tree to block lighting so they'll be looked at as a package, but we would look at areas to plant there. The 3rd and Banning lot, the Market Fest lot, there's a couple of medians that we'll look at adding. There's no trees, there's nothing in them currently. They've probably died or gotten taken out over time, but we'll again look at balancing that with the street light or the parking lot lighting. Likewise with the Ace lot, we'll look at both the median as well as perimeter to add or replace trees as needed.
If I may add, Mr. Copy, the study recommended at lot number 1, I think, along Banning, kind of a short fence, chopped up, blocked up. So I think that may be a piece of it too, depending on where funding comes, that could be incorporated with this parking lot or the street project. So it could be a combination of both things, depending on location.
That one's more likely to be part of the street project, just because we're going to have to be doing sidewalk removal, replacement, so repair. So it doesn't pay to do it and then tear it up a year later.
So in the spirit of feedback,
I'm skittish about putting trees in places where they do not have the chance to thrive, just to say that we have trees. I liked the conversation at the work study, particularly in the more of the sidewalk areas and surrounding areas of lower statured landscaping, fencing, fine, lower statured, whether it's hedging or I don't care what, but it's planters. But I'm not a big fan of walking along and seeing where trees used to be that did not have an opportunity to thrive. So that's feedback, worth exactly what you're paying for it. Second thing is I like the idea, I support the idea of downward-facing lighting. I personally am not interested. I'm having trouble picturing how we do bronze in some places and green in somewhere else's. Now, I'm not the guy to ask about what color to paint the walls. But if we have an obvious mismatch, somebody is going to come and say, you have brand incoherence, and I'd prefer to avoid that. So my preference is to go with what we got, unless we're planning on replacing everything, and then it's brand coherence in a different space, and that's okay too. I'd like to talk about financials. So I am supportive of the idea. I'm swayed by Member Hughes's arguments at our work study about doing everything now, paying for it now, not assessing. We don't have time. Get underway. Do it. Whether it's completely bare bones, whether there's a little bit of landscaping, whatever. I don't have strong feelings on that. And using for the city to pay for all of the work now. But what I haven't heard and what we haven't discussed is to make sure the next time this comes around, there needs to be a sinking fund created that squirrels away the money so that the next council who has to deal with this has got options that may include some kind of assessment, may include some kind of whatever, I don't know, but I guess I'm asking council colleagues to say, you know what, we don't want to have to do this, we don't want to have to do it this way again. So my question to you, Mr. Cowpy, if okay, I am not offended by the idea of pay to park. I know that there are some, Mayor, you've mentioned it, and I respect that. It's like, okay, it changes character. Yeah, well, so does coming up with 1.7 million multiplied by 20 years of inflation. So I see that as the most viable way of both metering the use of parking as well as garnering reasonable income that supports the future. So if you're going to reconstruct, what do you have to know now to install? Is there necessity for underground wiring that we need to prepare for as we tear up, reconstruct, and install new parking lots? Is there other stuff? And I'm not saying we can't take the other options that we discussed, that we have to take those off the table, but if we are going to include paid parking, I'd like that incorporated into the design thinking so that we are being as intelligent as we can about that. No, we haven't made that decision. We don't have to make that decision tonight. I'm not saying that we have to hold up this discussion or this decision in order to have that discussion, but I think we all were shaking our heads saying we don't want to have to do that or have our successors have to do that. So. Mr. Copy, from your standpoint, do we need to do anything in the design phase to prepare for pay for parking?
Mayor, members of the council, we would, short answer is yes, we want to look at potential locations. That is not something that we've done. We'd have to obviously get somebody in who's much more knowledgeable about the topic. Based on looking at other areas throughout this process. Typically, the kiosks used today are, and I think could be easily located, on the street side and not
In the lot itself?
and not in the lot itself. From an infrastructure standpoint, in looking at some other stuff, a lot of it is cellular based, so it's, if you're not putting individual meters at each spot these days. You are putting in a kiosk and you put your number down, or a lot of it's not even a number. It's I'm parking in this lot and here's my
Here's my driver's license. Or not my driver's, my vehicle plate.
There you go, your plate number. That's what I was trying to think of the same thing. You put your plate number in there and you're good to go. So it's likely an electrical line and a lot of it is cellular, like I said, or they may need data, fiber optic line. So
It's outside the parking lot per se.
hopefully.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, just to pick up where Councilmember Edberg left off. So at the work session, and I was traveling, so I was listening to it through the phone on my in an airport. But I was sort of negative on the pay to park idea. I've given it more thought. I'm more open to it now. I like the way you put it, for future things. And just doing a little bit of research, just as I'm sitting here, just other cities that are like us. Hopkins has a number of surface lots in their downtown. Some of them are free. Some of them are paid. $1 an hour, they got limits on them. And then they do permits. I think they're Stillwater. Stillwater's another one, obviously good example. Stillwater has permits. So there's a lot of ideas out there. I mean, this could be a way to sort of assess businesses. Their employees could pay for permits, and then they could park in permitted spots. The public could pay using a meter, your phone or whatever. And by the way, both these examples I've given you, street parking remains free. So if you can find a spot on the street, you're good. If you want to get in one of the lots, you've got a permit. Pay a yearly fee, a monthly fee, a quarterly fee, and then that's a way of getting the businesses to chip in a little bit, or use the kiosk, use your phone. Like if you go to Duluth, if you go around to different cities, you just pop on their app and you park with their app. It's pretty easy. Matter of fact, on my trip that I was just on, I was in Boulder, Colorado. Same thing, Pop on the app, tell them what my license plate was. I did it while I was in the coffee shop before they got there to ticket my car. So I kind of warmed up to the idea of some payment because, we had some discussion with the city manager about, like it or not, I don't know, it's frustrating, but we're unique. Wiper Lake's unique. We got these lots with no way to pay for them. So that's the history. Nothing we can do about it. It's a good thing that we have these free lots that somebody thought to set aside and construct, and now it's time to pay for them. I'm satisfied with the money we've set aside for this purpose in our improvement plan. We should do it. We should do it now. We shouldn't wait. I'm okay with the trees. I want the spots. So it's sad to take those big trees out. I'm hoping to do. I'm probably a little more than Councilmember Edberg on replacement trees. I might be willing to spend even more money on that as we do the next year project, assuming there's some science out there about how to do it so they don't die, and I think there is, but it costs more. So I just think there's so many benefits to tree cover in an urban area. Environmentally, shade, beautification. There's a lot of benefits. And I just keep saying this, the downtown is a huge asset for us, and we shouldn't screw it up. We shouldn't necessarily pinch pennies on this asset that does make our city unique. So I want to move forward with the lots as proposed, with the funding source as proposed, but I'm open to exploring some of this. Doesn't have to be next year. We can work our way into it. But we're not out of line with other cities to do this. So.
Any other comments? I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution ordering preparation and plans for specifications for the 2025 downtown parking lot reconstruction project.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The resolution is passed. Thank you. Item 9, discussion, nothing scheduled. Item 10, communication from the city manager. Ms. Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We had 2 open houses for our zoning code update, and thank you to the White Bear Press for writing an article about that to help inform the community. We did see a small turnout, a slight turnout. I know a couple of council members went to the evening one, so thank you for doing that. But all this is to say that we now have our online engagement open and on our social medias, and there's the link right there. So our GIS technician and our IT consortium have set up where you can go on our website and see your current zoning against what's proposed. So you can go in and look at any property and take a look at what the potential could be. So I think that's really neat. I want to encourage the community to go and look that up. And then the Real ID deadline is approaching again, but this time it's really here. It's May 7th, 2025. Just a reminder to everybody of our hours for the License Bureau: Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 8:30 to 5, and Tuesdays, 8:30 to 6. Lines are shortest midweek, midday, beginning of the month and the end of the month that tend to be our busiest. But come in and get your Real ID before that deadline, and we're certainly seeing an uptick in people coming through the License Bureau. So just a couple of reminders on that, and that's what I have for tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Council, any questions for the city manager? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. A motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.